Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Effed Up Stories. I'm your host, Will Pender, and here with me is my co-host, Ryan Sharp.
Hi, everyone.
And joining us is a very special guest whose hellish and true story involving a cursed artifact known as the Dibbuk Box, which also served as a loose base for the new Hollywood movie The Possession. And, of course, he wrote a book which I totally recommend any of you people who are interested to the paranormal, go pick it up. It's called The Dibbuk Box. And, of course, the man of which I speak is Jason Haxton.
Hey, thanks, Will. It's good to be here on the show.
And we're very, very excited to have you.
Very much so. Thanks so much for agreeing to do this.
So, and on that note, I'd actually like to shout out a nice big thanks, actually, to one of our fans, Gordon Mackay. And he goes by, you've probably seen his comments on some of our YouTube videos, goggsmackay. Without him, none of this would have been possible. He introduced us to the whole Dibbuk Box story. And of course, he got you, Jason, on our show. So,
I met Goggs actually in Aberdeen, Scotland. He made the mistake of saying that, well, the movie's coming out, and it's the most scary thing in the world. But thank goodness I'm in Aberdeen, Scotland, on the other side of the world from where Jason and his Dibbuk Box is. And I saw that on a blog. I said, I'm actually coming to Aberdeen on the opening night of the movie. Would you like to join me? And, of course, Goggs was like, you betcha.
Yeah. Goggs actually relayed that story to me in email. And, it was kind of funny because we shot this, after my little experience here, just the other day. Actually, I told him about it, and he was like, "Don't worry about it." I too was really scared actually at first to meet Jason because, here's a history of people who have come into contact with anything related to the box and have these very paranormal experiences. So. He was pretty freaked out. So,
well, Will, I'm excited to hear your stories about what happened to you. But we'll give the people some background, and they can find out, as much as they need to know. I think through your show, and if they want more, they can go online. There's plenty out there.
And get your book, because I'm going to tell you, we did Google, but that book was a huge part of where our information came from. A lot of information packed in there. So. The first thing is, what is the Dibbuk Box?
Well, a dybbuk, it's a Jewish item, and a dybbuk is a spirit that has unfinished business, and so it tries to redeem itself, but the only way, of course, it can do that is through a living person. And, of course, who wants to have some other spirit or soul sharing space in your body or renting it so that they can finish their business? And so in itself, it's not something that's typically welcomed, though they're not always considered necessarily bad because they try to find hosts that have the similar issues that are unresolved, and maybe in the process you become a better person. Or the dybbuk still sticks to their old ways, and they just manifest and make your life more miserable. So again, that's what I'm saying. Who would really want a dybbuk? Now imagine this thing being contained in a cabinet that can come and go as it would like. And so that's the essence of what actually a Dibbuk Box is. This thing has been trapped. And the way you trap a spirit is spirits cannot own physical objects. So by giving them and going through the ritual of saying, these items are yours, these coins, this candle, this rock, this hair, these are your possessions. Well, a spirit cannot own things. And so it kind of traps itself by taking possession and then not wanting to leave it. So in theory, can you truly trap it? No. But do often people trap themselves into their own belief system? So a spirit does, and stays with its physical items. So that's how you first get a dybbuk into a box. And then at the same time, it still has the power of trying to come to some resolution of unfinished business.
Yes. And in fact, there was a section in your book where they had talked about different ways that, or reasons why people would conjure a spirit and trap it. And one of the reasons is to use it as like a fuel source for like a spell or something of that nature. And we'll get into what that, I don't want to spoil that yet. But so So here we have a dybbuk, which is which has also been described as almost like a demonic entity in that it's omnipresent. Like if you have like a poltergeist or a ghost, it's local to where you are. So if you had if your house was haunted, okay, well that's where the ghost is usually going to be. Whereas a demon or something related to that can affect 10 different people in 10 different countries all at the same time.
Yeah, that's the story we get with the Dibbuk. And that's why, fair caution. People who hear the story alone and people who actually broadcast the story, it's a good look to you guys, Ryan and Will, that you don't have anything too bad happen. But the last time I gave a show, which was about a month ago, I don't do them that often, but this guy who does this show called Ground Zero, he was videotaping it because, what if something happens? Well, his producer went home with blistered hands and violently ill. His camera crew had burns down their neck as if they, almost as if it had been a radioactive or a sunburn of some type. The air cooling system was running, but it was putting out heat. All the communications shut down in the building. It's an online show, so nobody was calling in, nobody was getting them, and they had 3 forms of taping the show, 2 which failed. And they have this all on film. And when it was all said and done, I said, I guess we won't be invited back. He goes, oh my gosh, that's the best show we've ever had.
I actually, Jason, I actually watched that podcast the other day. I believe we're talking about the same one. You were on the phone, and I believe Kevin was in the studio with them.
And he actually brought the sister to the Dibbuk Box, and and so to be honest, I heard all of it. I never watched it. What'd you think of it, Brian?
I got to say I was pretty taken back, especially because just the next day I was slated to sit down and speak with you about the subject, and I thought, wow, perhaps I better watch myself over the next day or two. And I guess Will has his own little story. I personally I haven't had anything happen. Knock on wood. I guess the only thing that really raised my eyebrow. I'm looking outside here now. It's actually snowing pretty heavily where I'm at. Just yesterday, my cats were running around very excitedly, and I walked around the table to see what they were so excited about. And a very large house centipede come scurrying out into the middle of the room, and it was very dark and very I've never seen that particular variety around here.
And they don't usually appear in the winter time, or at least in the colder climates. So, and that's the story of the Dibbuk Box. You better check. You might have 1,000 more brooding somewhere underneath your table.
That's what I thought.
I won't lie. I looked under a few things.
So for my story, I can only kind of be a little more lighthearted now because it's come out better. But on Thursday night, actually, see, my mother has she has a tachycardia, and it was probably a year ago. She had to go to emerge with atrial fib, which basically her pulse, like her heart rate, was too high and she couldn't get it down. So when she went, they had to they shocked her heart, and that brought it down. It's a technique that they use. And that was scary at the time for her. And of course, we were all, none of us expected that either. And so Thursday night, she again starts having kind of an episode. And so I brought her to emerge, and we kind of thought it would, maybe the same thing. And we were just waiting for her to call so we could go pick her up. And what evidently ended up happening is that they shocked her heart 4 times, and she was asleep during this because obviously I guess it would hurt. And when she woke up, so this is when we got the call, all 4 times, never worked once. And so they put her on this medicine. I can't remember the name of it. And usually they say that medicine works in 6 hours to bring your heart rate down. And they put her right up in ICU. So it was pretty big deal here at home, and I visited her yesterday afternoon, and her pulse, they only managed to get it down. It was originally 180, and they got it
Wow.
down. Yeah, and they managed to get it down to 150, and that was after like 12 hours on this medication. Usually it works in 6, and it was just, we were wondering what's going to happen from here. And I had actually brought this up to my wife and my mom and stuff. I was wondering, like, could this be coincidence? Could this be the fact that I'm dealing with the Dibbuk Box story? The fact that I'm interviewing or Jason tomorrow night? And they all kind of shooed me. Nah, like she had these problems, and maybe that's all it is. It was something that was going to happen, but there's that what if. It's the timing, right? It's good
I was
to.
going to say the timing is kind of strange. And oddly enough, the Dybbuk has a whole history of heart problems. That's one of the quickest ways that it seems to get your attention. So,
And
like I
that's what I
said,
brought up immediately when he told me the story. I said, this sounds a lot like Kevin
Kevin's
Manus' mother.
mother's. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a freaky story, and we're going to get to that too.
Okay.
So the Dybbuk box, I mean, in reality, it's a unique wine cabinet that has a Dybbuk inside of it. So, I mean, going back to, let's go back to how you first acquired the box. I mean, you were a museum curator. You had a student working for you, and one day, like his roommate, Joseph, I believe was the name in the
Right.
book.
Right.
Joseph, he comes to work one day, and you guys are all sitting around, and he says, so my roommate Joseph bought this haunted box on eBay. And so everyone, not expecting everyone was gonna really jump on this. Like all eyes are on him, and he starts he starts explaining it. And so he takes you guys to look at the I believe the description on eBay.
Right.
And so let's have you tell the like I got it here, but let's just get a background on Kevin's original story.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing is we deal with history. We love history, and medical history is probably about as creepy and scary, as anything. The torture instruments that were used to help people did more harm than good often, and so we tell that story of medicine. And so we've got human remains, dissected nervous systems, baby skulls, people chopped in half that's put in formaldehyde. I mean, this is just nothing really creeps us out because we've seen it just about everything. And here the student says, yeah, my roommate bought this haunted Jewish wine box. It's like, what? It's like, well, we need to see this. And I said, well, whenever you're done doing whatever it is you're doing with this thing, we'd like to see this thing. And first we wanted to know more about it. So we went and looked at the description, and keep in mind, the original owner had got it at a yard sale, kind of an estate sale. And when his family was so freaked out by it, he wanted it as far away as possible. So he got rid of it on eBay, which is where this college student's roommate saw it. And I don't know what he was looking for to find such a thing, and picked it up. And there weren't even any really paranormal things. What's funny is, 9 years ago when he purchased this item, you really didn't have a category for this kind of stuff. And what's funny now is in the 9 years since the Dibbuk Box, they've actually eliminated the category of kind of the paranormal, because how do you tell if someone buys a spell if it's not working? It's like, I want my money back. My love spell isn't working. Well, how do you mediate that between a Wiccan and an eBay buyer? So I get why eBay says, we're getting out of the paranormal because it's just too hard to monitor.
Yeah, I could see that for sure.
Yeah, this kill my boss spell. It didn't work. He's still living. He's like, I want my $500 back. It's like, what? So anyway, so it is an interesting story because when you find out about the original buyer, he's just an average Joe. Trying to scrap out a living with a little antique shop, a little designing on the side, and he's gathering up articles, and he's looking around. He sees this sale and buys some things. Sees this kind of unusual little box. Thinks, hey, that might make a nice gift for mom. She's got a birthday coming up, so kind of buys it, takes it back to the shop, has a couple workers, and leaves to go do some errands. And while he's gone, and I met the shop owner, her name's Jane, She's left at the shop, and the shop has, kind of security doors that are locked, and she can't get out of the building. And she hears strange, what she calls cursing, but it'd be people. How do you know it is cursing? What she hears is something that sounds obviously angry and loud, and crashing lights.
And this was from the basement, right?
It's coming from the basement. She's up in the upper area, and if you were locked in a shop and you're hearing an obvious voice of some type that sounds angry and things busting, I'd be pretty much freaking out too, and I wanted to get out of there. I'd be calling up the owner saying, "Get here now, get me out." And of course, he doesn't know what's going on. And by the time he arrives, sure enough, the gate's locked. He opens it. She's huddled in a corner, hysterical. He goes down. He's down in the basement. He goes towards the basement. He goes to flip on the light switch, and no lights come on. So he comes back up, gets a flashlight. In the meantime, she's taken off. It's like, okay, whatever. He goes down in the basement, and all the fixtures, all the incandescent lights, and all the fluorescent lights are busted, all shattered all over the floor or in their sockets. It's like, no wonder no lights. And this weird stench of cat urine, and then this flowery scent. And he knows nobody's down there because they'd have to come past him.
That's right.
It's a one-way staircase.
And I believe when she first called him, he was going to call 911, and his phone died.
He couldn't get any help, so he just rushed back himself. Of course, that's what you do. When it was all said and done, he didn't think anything paranormal. He thought, well, somehow she got locked in. She got pissed off at me. She came down here and did some damage, and she's done working with me. It's just a case of a pissed off worker. That basically was his attitude about it, And so he goes on about his life, cleans up the little box, decides he's going to give it to his mom, calls her over for lunch, presents it to her, and gives her the gift. Said, "Now, Mom, I'm going to make a few calls, and we'll go out and have lunch." And worker comes in and says, "Hey, something's wrong with your mom." It's like, "What? I just left her." "What do you mean something's wrong with her?" It's like, "Something's not right." He goes there, tears streaming down her eyes. She's in a catatonic state next to this gift. And of course, he thinks, "Oh my gosh, she's suffered a stroke, heart attack." Calls 911, gets an ambulance there, gets her to the hospital. He shows up, and the doctor says, "Look, she's been under really quite a bit of stress. She's paralyzed on one side. She can't speak right now. Her short-term memory is probably going to be affected, so don't be surprised if she doesn't remember some of the things that were happening." And so while he's standing there with her, she can, at least with a pencil, kind of point out to letters, and that way they can communicate. And she spells out, "Hey, no gift." And he's thinking, "Oh, well, she remembers it's her birthday." It's like, "Ma, you can hear her. It's like, "Ma, I gave you that nice little wine cabinet." "Yeah, I gave you a birthday gift." Then she spells out, "hate gift."
I remember when I was reading this, there was quite a few things that happened to Kevin leading up to this, and I was thinking, how could he not understand at this point that there's something? Because I remember he even gave it to family members to hang on to, and and
sold it a couple of times. It kept coming back.
Yeah, and I remember one time it even had a note inside that said something like to the effect of, "There's a darkness associated with this box." And it just never clicked for some reason for him that, this box has something paranormal about it. So,
well, if you're not into the paranormal, I'm the same way. When I started getting sick around the box and everybody else was, I wasn't thinking there's a spirit. I think the box is contaminated. It's got anthrax. It's got arsenic. It's got cyanide. Someone either by accident or on purpose has poisoned this thing, and every owner is basically losing their hair, getting bloody eyes, coughing up blood, and getting these weird tastes and hide their skin conditions. This is all typical poisoning, It's like, this isn't any spirit. But Canada, fortunately, has these wonderful kits for heavy metals. My son's a science major and senior in college. So, we get out the kits. We basically run the test. We swab it. We measure it. Clean. So I think, okay, it's not contaminated with some type of chemical. It's contaminated with something biological. So you get out a black light. Maybe it's black mold. Maybe it's, tuberculosis. Who knows what's on this thing? So we do a sweep of it with a black light, trying to find some biohazard. Nope, nothing on it. So it's like, okay, what is then if it's not something physical, what else is left to make all these strange illnesses happen?
And
And I guess it's it would be good to point out. I mean, that when this all started, would you call yourself, more of a skeptic in the
Oh
beginning?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm not really into the paranormal. That's why I even wasn't half afraid of getting this box. Though I was cautious enough, as you guys have read, is that just bring that thing over. It's like I wanted to see it because of my own historical curiosity, but I wanted to see it at their apartment or at the museum, not in my own home. And I only
Yes.
wanted to see it for 10 or 15 minutes and be done with it. I make my assessment. Is it real? Is it fake? That's all I want to do. Look at the materials and can I draw a conclusion based on what I'm seeing of this being something that truly was of a spiritual nature, or it's just someone's garage fodder and just strung together in a piece of crap. And that's why I wanted to see it. I was just curious, about that. And what ended up happening was the college students, of course, started having bug manifestation, kind of like your little scorpion creature. People started having eye conditions and respiratory problems and spontaneous illness and exploding lights and everything dying and shadowy figures and the box opening on its own. And so pretty quickly, the college kids had their fill of it and wanted done with it. And the guy decided to sell it. It's like, well, I don't want to buy it. I just want to see it. It's like, well, it's for sale. It's not, I said, well, then I have no interest in it. But as I was telling this story to a friend who is an illusionist, who kind of does a little bit of magic, he wanted to do this kind of little haunted tour and then bring them to his house and create a spiritual illusion. But he says, no, why would there be a spirit at my house? I mean, I live in a modern looking house. People are going to laugh at me. I said, they wouldn't laugh at you if you had the Dibbuk box. So I told him the whole story of this crazy thing. And I said, so we'll make one. He goes, well, didn't you just tell me the kid's getting rid of it? I said, well, yeah, but you don't want the real thing. He goes, why not? And of course, he's probably young, like Ryan and you and Will, young guys like you are a little more risk taking. You get to be about 50 and you start realizing, yeah, maybe I should be you've done enough stupid things in your life. You realize maybe I should kind of hold off on this. And so I'm saying, no, we just make a fake. No, we get the real thing. And if there's a spirit, all the better. And, I wanted to see it bad enough. It kind of let talk myself into it. So, and he says, but I don't know how to do this eBay purchasing and all that. I don't have an account. You buy it and then you can give it to me if there's any problems. I thought, well, that sounds good. That's kind of a fail-safe method, except that after I bought it and it started doing weird things, he was nowhere to be had. So it's kind of like, okay, that was a bad choice. I mean, you know who your friends are when you have a demented haunted object and they won't take it.
Yeah, I remember reading several occasions where you went, it was like, well, can you just hang on to this thing for a little bit? I need a little bit of a break. And his wife didn't want it. She was having company or,
stuff like that. Or he's spontaneously ill. It's like, wait a minute. An hour ago, you were fine. Well, I'm ill now. You can't bring it. Well, what's that about?
Yeah, like
That's okay. You be ill. I'm going to give it to you. It won't have any effect on you.
Yeah. So here we have.
So that's how I ended up with it. Yeah, I ended up with this crazy thing, and I got really sick, and I had all these things, but I'd learned my lesson. Everybody who gotten rid of it didn't really get better, and so my thought is, if I get rid of it, then I've lost control. Now, I do want to tell you something. I did talk to the mother of Kevin, and I said, because Kevin said, my mom, when I finally found him to find out more about the box, because my mom really won't speak to me about this gift. It's like, well, yeah,
It almost killed her, but
who gives their mother a haunted box? It's like,
it's the perfect gift.
now I would say my mother-in-law. There's a whole different.
Yeah, for sure.
I've got a great mother-in-law, but even that, there are days. But needless to say, I did call her once, and she was under great pain. She felt that she'd been shoved from behind and had fallen to her knees and was quite injured. And she says, my leg is swelling badly. I don't know where my son is, and I'm really scared. And just stay on the phone. It's like she, never wanted to talk. This woman was a former Marine and had basically during the Korean War a pill around her neck because she was a typist, obviously in a military camp. And if the site was captured, she was to kill herself. And that was just expected. So this is one tough woman. So, for her to be nervous and upset,
That's
And she never
extreme.
talked. Yeah, she was always matter of fact. As soon as I bring up the Dibbuk box, she never wanted to talk about it. That thing's
Clam up.
cursed. I don't. It's bad. I don't want to talk about it. So I never ever got anywhere. Well, this night she's like, I don't know where my son is, and I've fallen, and I don't want to. I don't want to hang up. I'm worried. I don't feel right. And so I thought, well, here's my opportunity to chat. And I said, so tell me about about that. She goes, I think it has something to do with that gift. I said, well, tell me about that. I said, what happened when you touched it? She goes, as soon as I saw it, I knew it was wrong. She goes, but what do you tell your son? Here he's giving you a gift. Get that piece of crap out of my sight. It's your son, for crying out loud. And all of our mothers have probably stuff. They had us, that alone. Labor alone. If men had to have kids, there would be zero population growth.
I agree. I agree.
I mean, yeah, I've watched my mom or my wife have 2 kids. That's enough. It's like, never want to do that. So the bottom line is, yeah, you already feel sorry for your mom having to, go through all this. So, you give her a gift, and she goes, what are you going to do? Tell your son, get that thing out of my face? She goes, but I knew it was wrong. And she goes, and then when I touched it, she goes, a surge of power. I thought, was it painful? What? She goes, it was pure energy, like nothing. She goes, I just wanted to run. She goes, we live near Mount St. Helens in Portland, Oregon. And when that thing explodes, trust me, if you've never been around an exploding volcano, you don't know fear. You don't even know where to hide. She goes, it was just like that. As soon as I touched it, I knew something was wrong. She goes, and the next thing I realized, I'm in a hospital and I'm paralyzed and I can't communicate. And I knew it was that gift. And
just for comparison, I mean, that is not how a stroke is typically described. I mean,
okay, good. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't know. But that's what I'm saying. So she said she didn't really. She goes, I had a stroke as a result, but she goes, what precipitated the stroke was the problem, and it was like sticking your finger probably in an outlet, based on about what she goes, and that wouldn't have covered it,
And now
So
Oh,
yeah.
sorry. You had an experience yourself. Your first night that you had the box, I believe you and your magician friend had brought it to the museum, and you had you had your standard gloves that you would use to handle different artifacts and stuff like that, and you guys went through the contents of what was in the box and these different things, and at some point you wanted to feel, get a sense of this box, and you took the gloves off and put your hands on it, and you got a really bad pain, I believe, in your stomach.
Oh yeah, it was, and bad pain doesn't describe it. I mean, it's seriously. I don't know if any of you guys are hunters out there, but it's like someone taking a buck knife, stabbing it through your abdomen, and then ripping it up until it gets to about where your heart is. It was such a pain that, I mean, I was nauseated. And what I really was just wanting to do is, just to see, this thing was supposed to have this great energy, So I thought, well, let me put my hands on it. So I kind of said, did what you normally don't do as a museum personnel, was took the gloves off, set my fingers and my hands on this wooden crate, closed my eyes just to see if it had it in it. And it had almost like a pulse. And literally it felt like it just collapsed into liquid. I literally opened up my eyes because I thought, my gosh, what just happened? And firmly planted on the top of it were my hands. Closed them again, and it felt like it just whooshed. But at that second time, then it felt as if something went into me and just started ripping through me. And I literally, that was the end of it. It's like, I'm done. I wasn't going to take it home. I just shoved it to the storage area, told Michael, I'm going home. I don't feel well. And that was it for the night. Of course, went home, felt a little better, but not really great. Went to bed, had these horrible hag dreams, and woke up in the morning to shave to go to work. And as I looked into the mirror, there are these bloody eyes. I mean, literally blood soaked eyes, as if someone just gouged him, looking back at me. My wife came in, it's like, what did you do to yourself? It's like, I don't know. But eyes usually, eyes heal pretty quickly. So I thought, well, whatever I did, maybe it was just because I wasn't sleeping well. Maybe I rubbed them, but never have done anything like this where literally the blood vessels are exploded and you literally could just see the blood. I mean, you still have more blood than whites. So she said, well, put some saline solution in it or something. And I thought, well, it'll go away in a couple of days. 3 weeks later, it hadn't changed at all. And so that's when I went to the optometrist. And so that really was a strange thing. Now, here's what's interesting. finally, I did seal this thing. I mean, I've talked to some Wiccans, and again, it goes against everything about my Methodist upbringing. I mean, to even dabble, even think about dabbling with, placating gods and doing rituals with candles and saying things and salt and basil and sage. I mean, it is so against the grain of what I was brought up with. But I thought it was just getting so bad. The coughing up of blood, breaking out in hives. Just these shadowy figures. I thought I will do anything to get this thing out of my life. And so after I did kind of stick it, as you would do with the salt, the basil, and smudging with sage, I went to take a bath, which again, sea salt and basil, and you smudge, and then you get in this hot water to cleanse yourself. And it was that same, and this you have to understand was months later, it was that same feeling as if something had just stabbed me. And I got out of the bath because I didn't know if it was going to come out of one end or the other. All I knew is I was nauseous and I was in pain. I got out of the bathtub, and all of a sudden this clear mucus just kept coming out of me in the handfuls of it. And when it was all out of me, the pain was gone. And it's almost as if whatever came in the moment I touched it had come out of me all those months later. And everything changed. Everything changed after that.
So do you think it's like going back to, and I guess we'll have to explain this later, but it said that the box chooses you. Like when you put your hands on the box, it chose you.
I think it does, because it has varying effects with different people, but maybe people that, for whatever reason, are more sensitive, and which is why some of you who work with the radio and the podcast might have different effects, or viewers just looking at it. They're just sensitive that they just tap right into the wavelengths halfway around the world. So
let's go back to, in your book, you mentioned that, like, even when Joseph had this box, like the student that you had working for you had invited you to check it out, and you were a little bummed out when that hadn't come through because you had an interest in it, and you described it as like you had a drawing to it, and it's like
there was a tremendous sense of loss.
Loss and emptiness. I mean, it would be as if losing, a close friend or a loved one. And I thought, this is strange. It's something I've never even seen, but it was kind of a hollowness inside, and a real regret that I missed my opportunity.
And so everybody who's like, have been involved with this box. I mean, what kept echoing through my head was almost like in the Lord of the Rings. Like once you've had that ring, you're drawn to it. It's like you have a need to get the ring or experience it or whatever it is that this thing does. So all throughout this is almost as if this box is calling you. And at the same time, it even calls insects. And this is what we were kind of talking about earlier, where wherever this box was put, I believe when the students had it, it was all these different bugs had, gotten into the walls and,
infestations. I mean, it is like, typically, with these different religious things, you always have the hordes of locusts or some type of, manifestation way beyond what's normal. So you're right.
Yeah, and it was like, well, like usually when you have insects and like you said, like the plague and stuff like that, I mean, that stuff is usually associated again with evil, if it was like demonic in nature. I mean, these are the kinds of things that people associate, and Joseph's hair had fallen out, and all these different students, like you said, had gotten spontaneously sick and stuff. So, I mean, when you first got this box, I mean, being skeptic and all things being true, I mean, were you a little worried, or was it just, well, my magician friend will take it off my hands?
Yeah, no, it did worry me, because it really was, I had at that time young children and good, and again, it's something that I wasn't familiar with, and so it really did completely freaked me out, especially these the Kabbalah students say, as do the priests of the Kabbalah faith or the Jewish Kabbalah mysticism, that bugs are drawn to energy sources. It's just like a light; they just can't help themselves. That if a light's on, they flock to it because they sense that energy and want to be around it. And so that's why with plagues and stuff, wherever there is an evil energy, they're just drawn to it. They can't help themselves, and they want to bask in just the energy of it. And so, and they're bugs that you don't typically see, like these house scorpions, that you might see one, but you wouldn't see hundreds of them all flocking to where this item is. Or when I went to seal the Dibbuk box, I went into this closed basement with a crawl space, and honeybees came out. Honeybees, by wintertime, they're in their nest with their nectar for the winter, waiting for spring. They're not out and about, and they're certainly not in places like that. And so it is strange. You start thinking, what's going on here with these insects and strange things? So it did panic me because I knew I'd done it to myself. It's like, what did I get? And whether it was psychosomatic, it didn't matter. I couldn't get it out of my head.
Okay, well,
and so you mentioned, of course, we talk about sensitives, people who are, a little more in tune with the unseen world, and
right.
I can't help but think about this, the story that you recounted in your book. I believe Kevin was telling you about when he was leaving his store or walking past his store. And a street person stopped him and said something to the effect that, somebody's going to get hurt down there if you guys keep doing what you're doing. And he recounted that he had seen black cloaked figures, spinning around some object in the basement of the shop.
Right. And like I said, Brian, I have to say thanks for reading the book because you know all the details. You read it very thoroughly.
I certainly did. And just 2 days ago, I bought it. So
you read it nonstop.
Yes, most certainly.
So anyway, but that's what's weird is, of course, Kevin had been out of town. He's like, my shop's like, of course, you'd be concerned if you heard somebody, if someone said, oh, there's somebody in your house. Like, what? No, I was out of town. What do you mean? I want to know about this. Who was in my shop? Who was in my house? And what were they doing? And he's like, yeah, and had collaboration from somebody. Yeah, I've been watching it too. It's like, what's going on down there? It's like, nothing's going on down there. So it certainly, to me, sounded almost like a Jewish minion of some type, but who knows? Weird stories.
So we're going to take a little break now. I'm going to play a track for you off my ethereal album called Lament. And when we return, we will hear the rest of the story with the Dibbuk Box and Jason Haxton. Lost without some control, spellbound by our lust for gold, competing with our race for roles. In a world made for show, we are sick in our hearts, and we are sick in our minds, and we are sick in our souls, and we are sold their souls for gold, and now they're gone. And when we're sick as them, we'll come along. And we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, if you enjoyed the song, you can check out all my stuff at my official website at doortoanima.com. That's doortoanima.com. And of course, you can buy those songs on iTunes, Amazon, and everything else. But with that said, let's get back to the main story. So really, when the story gets really interesting is when you go back and track down Kevin. And, Kevin, he takes you to where he plans to take you to where he had bought the box at the liquidation sale. Right. And of course, you guys can't find it. And, essentially what you end up finding out is that a lot of the stories or details that Kevin had told in his original description on eBay couldn't be true. And part of that comes from he explained that he had found the family. Like I believe you sent him out on a mission to track down, right. And he finds this family, and he ends up speaking to this woman, Sophie. And Sophie was supposedly the first cousin of the 103-year-old where he had initially bought this. It was her estate being sold off, named Havala. And so he bought this box from Havala's estate at the liquidation sale. And so Sophie was her first cousin. And she says, this box goes all the way back to the 1930s, leading up to the Holocaust. And she says that, Havala, her and her family had been dragged off by the Nazis to the concentration camp, and Havala was the only one to survive. And she used to have these seances with, I guess other members who were being holed up and stuff like that. And originally it was for fun, right? They were having fun contacting the spirits.
Messing around, yeah. Parlor games.
And then, as they get news that this is getting worse with the Nazis now. She gets angry. She's, her family's taken from her. So all this emotion, and she takes up the book of the Kabbalah, and she says, in this, there's this rabbi, and he tells a story of where he made this creature out of clay, and using his mind and stuff like that. I mean, it doesn't have a soul, but just using his mind and focusing it into this thing, it brings it to life, and it defends the Jewish people. And so she gets the idea that, forget all this messing around with just pretending to summon a spirit. Let's summon a spirit. Let's trap it in this box, and we'll use that as a fuel for a magic to fight against the Nazis. That's how they were going to fight against the Nazis. Only it goes terribly wrong. Because they had made a relationship with this entity that they refer to as the Dibbuk, and the Dibbuk all this time had been building up and saying, "Let us out, bring us, do a ritual and bring us out permanently." And that's when they decide they want to trap it into the box. That would be the wisest thing to do. Mm. So it comes out, and as Sophie put it, I mean, they felt responsible, that this thing had caused the Holocaust, that had caused all these other bad things that had happened to the Jews, and she was really sorry for it and apologetic. And I mean, by the time Kevin leaves there, he said his ankles were swollen and all these different kinds of things. But of course, as you find out, as you start looking for you want the last name, which is like, right. And you can't find it because they have a different way of spelling and all this stuff. So Kevin says, and he doesn't want to get it. It's a privacy thing now.
It is. Part of it's just he doesn't want to release that information because he knows exactly what I'll do, and I would find them and contact them, and I would.
Yes, you've been a very persistent man in this book. The lengths of which that you went to, I mean, is amazing, but I mean, is awesome at the same time. So you end up tracking down Kevin's brother, and through his brother, and I mean, this is where we got to go back to the dreams that you had. So I mean, these dreams that you originally had, you had these dreams of an old woman who would, in this dream, she would morph and into these disfigured, horrible, monstrous, depictions, and she would beat you, and you would actually wake up with real bruisings. And I mean, and this is something that was echoed by other owners, and so you have that dream, and then at the same night, this was the first night you had the box. The second dream you have, and you dream of this little, again, it's the same old woman, but this time it's a pleasant kind of a dream, and you're in this furniture store, and she's pointing to this white box about the same dimensions of the Dibbuk box, and like you're not really sure. I mean, so we're kind of left to speculate what was going on, but it almost seems as if she's trying to sell you the Dibbuk box. Now, this is important because going back to where you met up with Kevin's brother, you end up getting to see a picture of Ethel. And what you find is Ethel is the person.
Oh, yeah. She's the person in my dream the day I got the Dibbuk box.
Exactly.
And Ethel
Ethel ran what was called a sundry store. And a sundry store is like a little Walmart back in the 50s and 60s. They had everything. And she ran a little, and this is what this store was. As I looked around, there were pillows and lampshades and clothes. I mean, it was a mixed match of everything. And yet she kept coming back to, you want this, and seeing that this was the same woman. Now, here's the other thing. I have to forewarn you, in the story, there actually is, once the book came out, more information came forward. And his brother, who I trusted, a former, officer, law enforcement officer, stayed with him several days at a cabin on the coast of Oregon, and told me that, look, let me be honest with you about this. First, this gal Jane, this woman from Phuket, doesn't exist. I once mentioned to my brother that the prettiest girls were from there, and he incorporated in the story. There never was a worker like that. The other thing is basically mysticism. All this, the box itself, it never had anything in it. Blah blah blah. And so I thought, oh, well, this is a credible source. He's a law enforcement agency. But here's what's funny is I did meet Jane from Phuket. And if you watch Paranormal Witness 2, you will see her. And she's a very credible source. And other people outside the family said, yeah, Jane had worked there until she abruptly quit. And so it's like, well, wait a minute. This law enforcement officer should have known this. And yet he completely convinced me that this was just a fictitious person. Then that, his family never has done anything with mysticism, whatever. But there's a half-sister, and this half-sister basically said, oh, no. Ethel, my grandmother, lived to be 103. That's odd. How often do Jewish people live to be 103?
Exactly.
Not as common as you would think. It just so happens to be that magic number. And I looked her up. That is based on her birth date, how old she would have been at the time. And she goes, she wore symbols, she practiced Kabbalah, she did it in a kind way, but she used mysticism to advance herself. So, and she lived with me, and then she lived with Kevin. And so I'm starting to think, wait a minute. And then the last piece is, after my book came out, a notary, and that's a person who makes their living by saying, this is the truth. A notary for the state of Oregon contacted me and said, look, I saw in the news that this story came out about our area. I got your book. Do not doubt this thing is what it is. I know this family. I worked for them. Kevin's father was a lawyer, and I was the only non-Jew person there. And I knew these kids growing up. I knew him. He was a good lawyer. He was fair. But he goes, the power that came out of that family, I mean, enough to shut down machines and things. Basically, we'd walk into a store with all electronic cash register, and she would walk through and they would just basically all go off. She's basically, the mother has been banned, Kevin's mother, from being anywhere near anything electronic in the house because it basically goes haywire. There is so much energy in that woman, and I would never even mess with her. This is a person who makes their living by telling the truth, and don't ever let them know that I've told you this. But it was really fascinating to me is that the stories that she basically wrapped, that it makes me believe that there is more to this story within Kevin's family, whether it really is their family that created this, or it is within their circle that created this, because there are inconsistencies, and yet there is something, and no rabbi doubts it, that is a Jewish artifact. The writing, the Hebrew, it is just something that the average person like you and I would never do.
And
so they don't doubt it's Jewish.
And that's exactly where we're going with our theory.
It's funny that you should go in that direction, because just yesterday, after I finished the book and sat and kind of digested the information, of course Will and I were talking about today's interview and whatnot, and I said, to me, I just feel that I don't even know. I feel that Havala and Sophie were just two characters that were
AKA pseudonyms, that were drawn up, but that are really family members.
Exactly, or even if both of them were just two characters that were created to, tell the stories that Ethel had told Kevin since they were close, that lived together. I often wondered, did Ethel actually create the box? And there is this history of mysticism in their family. Maybe it's something it was beyond Kevin's understanding or control, and he just had to. It was a cry for help. Get it out there on the internet. Somebody got to know something.
Well, and get rid of this thing that we've created, which is why they also have the sister box still. But the funny thing about it is, I did my research and I followed up, and I think it's in my book that I actually followed up the nursing home where Ethel was at, and who truly did live to be 103 and was in perfect health. I mean, what killed her was pneumonia, and it was, with most people, you can be 30 or 40 and die in 3 or 4 days with pneumonia. That up to that point, she was bright, she was cheerful, she was alert and healthy, and then it just was over like that. The funny thing is, before I got the Dibbuk box, we have at the medical school, you can go and get a health assessment, and you have to before you can use the equipment. They have a whole gymnasium, but they want to make sure you're not going to die on the treadmill, so they run an assessment. They check all your vitals and all this stuff. And so before I got the Dibbuk box, I thought, you know what? I'm 45. I need to do a little more exercise. I got to go through this test so I can use the equipment. So I went over there and did a testing. The weird thing is I never got back over there. I never really did do any type of exercising. But what's funny is about 3 weeks ago, I decided, well, you know what? I'm now 54, 9 years later. Actually, I didn't know how long it had been. I went over there and said, 3 or 4 years ago, I came over here and did an assessment, and I want to use the equipment. The guy in charge said, Jason, that was 9 years ago. It's like, oh, it's like, oops. It's like, well, I feel like I need to use the equipment, so I got to do this stupid test. So go ahead and run your battery of tests on me. And they test your pulse and your blood pressure and your flexibility and your endurance, and they have to go through all these things. And so I ran the exact same test I had run 9 years ago. And the thing is, they still had it in the things, and they actually chart it to see. They usually like to tell you how you've degenerated. What was weird about it is that everything, and I wasn't unhealthy 9 years ago. As a matter of fact, I was in pretty good health, but everything was better. It actually was in 9 years, and I haven't lifted a finger. My pulse was lower, my blood pressure was lower, and it wasn't high to begin with. My flexibility had improved. It's like in 9 years, your flexibility doesn't get better.
No.
My endurance basically was the same or a little bit better. And so I'm starting to think, as much ill as you would have read in my book that the Dibbuk Box, I thought, caused me, all along I've been told that I'm in perfect health, I'm in good health. It's as if in 9 years I haven't truly aged physically. Weight or anything is actually all improved. And yet, how many people do not lift their finger? Actually, there was a reversing process. I actually was fairly gray from head to tail. That's one of the first. You're an old man when you go to take a leak, and I'm sorry if I offend anybody. And you take a look down there and go, "Oh my God, I'm getting gray." It's like, and you guys, you're not there, but trust me, one day you're going to look down there and go, "Oh my God." Here's the thing, I'm not gray anymore. It's kind of really absolutely weird. But
it's astronomical.
It's as if going through a reversal process. I mean, graying is caused in your hair and your armpit hair and all that because of ammonia buildup. Your body builds up ammonia and it strips the coloring out of your hair follicles, and so that's why people go gray. It's just that you can't get rid of all this extra ammonia in your body. What it's telling me is actually my body's found a way to get rid of it, and I don't take anything. So it's kind of like, okay. So maybe I'll live to be 103.
What else could you say but shalom?
So I don't know. I'm just saying it's weird.
It's that's very interesting. I mean, of all things,
I should say, my
ammonia.
precious. I wanted to go on my precious. You think I'm letting go of that box? Hell no. It's like Dorian Gray. I get this painting. It can get old. I'm getting younger.
Hey, I dug that
I don't
movie.
know.
It was a good movie. So
I don't know.
So essentially what we have here, I mean, like, so you got two sides of the story. I mean, you go to the family members and you're getting conflicting sides.
Oh, yeah.
But the box itself, I mean, there's no doubt. I mean, anyone that has had contact with this thing will tell you there's something bad with the box. Bad things follow it and everyone who comes in contact with it, right? So then you have to ask yourself, we know that parts of Kevin's story is untrue. But the box is haunted. He didn't want any money or fame from the box as evidence.
When he sold it, he was selling it for 99 cents. The
Exactly.
lowest you could sell something for.
Exactly. So, I mean, what would be his motivation?
And then it's gone, and he doesn't follow. I mean, if you were taking this much trouble, don't you think you would kind of chart it?
Yeah.
He was completely oblivious. When I went there, he didn't know what the hell I was talking about, what I wanted. It's like, why are you bothering me? I said, well, 500,000 people can't be wrong. Said, what do you mean? It's like, hundreds of thousands. And he literally left. He goes, I'm going to go home. I said, just go home. Type in Dibbuk Box. And then let's meet in a couple hours. He literally was as if he'd been in a car accident, shell shocked. I mean, he truly, you can read that in a person. He didn't know what to do. It's so it wasn't about that.